Do you like the feeling of power you have as a newspaper proprietor, of being able to sort of formulate policies for a large number of newspapers in every state of Australia?
Well, there's only one honest answer to that, of course, and that's yes.
In 1968, Rupert Murdoch arrived in London to negotiate the purchase of the News of the World, seeing off his only real rival, Robert Maxwell. And within a year, he'd acquired and shortly after relaunched The Sun. Murdoch was here to stay, and he was determined to alter the character of British journalism. Few would doubt that Murdoch is a newspaper man. It's in his blood. His father, Keith Murdoch, was a war correspondent, and following his death in 1952, the 21-year-old Rupert left his sub-editor's job at the Daily Express in London to run the family business back in Australia. So began a pattern for Murdoch's career: hostile takeovers, a rapid expansion, bold risk-taking, and a hands-on approach to running his business.
You don't delegate very well, I'm told. You take decisions at a very minor level, deciding what program should go on a television service, this sort of stuff.
I delegate enormously. I have to. There aren't enough hours in the day to run everything. I delegate everything. But when I'm around, I interfere a bit too much.
It didn't take Murdoch long to make himself an enemy of the British establishment, printing gossipy stories and notoriously digging up 10-year-old dirt with the publication of Christine Keeler's diaries in 1972. But circulation figures of both his UK titles were promising, and the very nature of the popular press seemed to be evolving under his direction.
Let's see what's happening in the Star this week. First, Glenn and Sarah Campbell talk about his unreleased record, Sarah's Song, and the Star prints all its lyrics for you. Then the latest on Kojak, King Kong's girlfriend, Clark Gable's son, and Rosalind Carter's second-hand inaugural gown.
In 1973, Murdoch left Britain, turning his attention to the United States. He soon founded the supermarket tabloid The Star, and later purchased the New York Post. But at the start of the 1980s, perhaps sensing a natural political ally in the newly elected Margaret Thatcher, Murdoch returned to Britain to launch a bid for the ailing Times and Sunday Times.
I don't believe that the people who read the Times are any better than the people who read the Sun. I just believe they're different.
But
I'm very proud of the Sun.
On the face of it, this is the establishment's worst nightmare. One of the pillars of British conservatism, run by a man known only for his populist approach. But the alternative was the very real prospect of the Times and Sunday Times falling out of business completely.
Obviously, you will wonder what my plans are for the papers. Whatever proposals for progress may be developed, there will be no fundamental change in the characteristics. I am not seeking to acquire these papers in order to change them into something entirely different.
Having successfully altered the character of the popular press in Britain, Murdoch set his sights on the industry itself, instigating an audacious shift from his printing plant in Fleet Street to a state-of-the-art facility in Wapping in East London. The new plant was built and developed under a shroud of secrecy and fired into operation when a Fleet Street strike was called in January 1986. Redundancy notices on the printers were served, and the so-called Battle of Wapping began.
The Wapping dispute has produced some of the worst scenes of violence since the miners' strike. Hundreds of demonstrators and policemen have been injured as each Saturday the streets around the plant are turned into a battleground.
This is industrial relations Rupert Murdoch style, but it has great implications for all groups of workers.
You're looking for Rupert Murdoch, we know where he is. He's hiding behind the old barbed wire, as you know.
The strike lasted a year, and the fallout broke the back of the Fleet Street trade unions, who were forced to fall into line with Murdoch's working practices and relocate. But by this time, Murdoch had already moved on, setting his sights firmly on the advent of satellite television.
5, 4,
3, 2, 1.
Run BTC.
By the end of the 1980s, Murdoch had the bit between his teeth. He purchased 20th Century Fox in America in 1984 and launched the Fox Broadcasting Company the following year. His plans for satellite broadcasting in Britain, meanwhile, had the media establishment reeling.
What I get quite angry about with him and his newspapers is the way they continually knock what has gone before, and there was more of that today. He dismissed drama and sport and comedy. I mean, he's probably never seen Bread or Any Fools and Horses.
If the hemorrhage of cash can't be staunched, will you set a time limit on how long you take the losses, say 5 years?
Oh, of course. Whether it be 5 years or 4 years or 6 years, that will depend on its extent.
Sky's losses nearly bankrupted him, and he was forced to merge with British Satellite Broadcasting to form B-Sky B. B-Sky B then staked everything on the newly formed Football Premier League. This bold and ultimately successful move coincided with a shift in thinking in the Labour Party, who were about to concede a good deal of ground to make themselves electable. Old Labour became New Labour, Tony Blair paid court to Rupert Murdoch, and for the first time in decades, Murdoch titles began giving their backing to the Labour Party.
Mr. Murdoch, how would you describe your relationship with Tony Blair?
I'm a supporter.
Rupert Murdoch has always maintained he does not subscribe to one political ideology, but his free market, anti-union, anti-establishment and pro-consumer choice stance places him firmly in the party of individual interest. He's cunning, ruthless, single-minded, perhaps even brilliant, but he's also ageing. As the 90s became the noughties, Murdoch finally began to open the door to his potential successors. First his eldest son Lachlan, then younger son James.
You're familiar with the word mafia?
Yes, Mr. Watson?
Mr. Murdoch, you must be the first mafia boss in history who didn't know he was running a criminal enterprise.
Mr. Watson, please. I think that's inappropriate. Mr. Chairman.
We just finished our meal and we're just going home, so...
So what have we seen with the revelations of phone hacking? An organisation with a swollen sense of power and entitlement that has allowed itself to disregard any sense of moral responsibility? The anti-establishment establishment thinks it can do what it wants? Or just an overpowerful company left to graze by its ageing monarch, overreaching and let down by successors charged with its care? The Leveson inquiry and the scandal of phone hacking will rumble on, as will News Corporation. The question on Wednesday is whether this is the moment that Rupert Murdoch finds a way to start a fight back.
As for my comments, Mr. Chairman, and my statement, which I believe was around the closure of the News of the World newspaper.
Before you get to that, I would just like to say one sentence. This is the most humble day of my life.